Hi guys. I think that one of the worst decisions that any government has ever made was to allow first home buyers to cash out their Kiwisaver to buy property. Now I do understand the argument that they cynically give, that it helps young people get into home ownership, but it's obvious that that is not the reason they allow it. They allow it because it puts more pressure on an already overpressurized housing market. The property investors absolutely love it because it puts another artificial floor under house prices. Can you imagine a government years ago being prepared to wipe out a generation's Kiwisaver just to artificially pump a housing market that only benefits the richest in society? Now, it would never have been allowed years ago, but for some reason this modern day sociopathic MP type thinks it's normal. And it's obvious that it is the exact opposite of what they should be doing. Yet once again, we have successive governments robbing the futures of the youngest and the poorest to line the pockets of the people who already have everything. All this policy does is make house prices higher, meaning the young people have to take on more debt. Then they also have to use up big lumps of their Kiwisaver, meaning that they will also lose big chunks of the pension. So not only will they be poorer now, they will also be poorer when they're older too. But even worse, these are the lucky ones. The ones who will really suffer once again are the people who do not have much or any Kiwisaver to start with. You know, the people with the least already. They now have absolutely no chance. They are now facing a life of insecurity in renting as house prices are now just too far out of reach thanks to government policies. With rents costing so much, over the length of these people's lives, they will spend an absolute fortune in rent. Far more than they would have had to if they could just buy a home like was possible 20 years ago, before the government decided to turn buying houses into the only game in town. The way things are going, there is going to be an absolute massive percentage of pensioners stuck in private renting. And this number is going to keep growing and growing and growing, as the governments follow the same destructive path of manipulated house price appreciation. So just imagine now how hard it is for pensioners in private rentals. Their landlords keep jacking up the rent more than the pension, and they keep getting thrown out so the landlord can sell up and get more capital gains. Imagine this when you're old and frail. These poor pensioners must be petrified of losing their homes in their final years, and I don't think they will get much sympathy from any blood-sucking capital gain chasing landlord if they get sick, do you? If the governments keep on turning the New Zealand rental market into a vicious dog-eat-dog, unempathetic landlord enriching hellscape, then imagine what it'll be like in 30 or 40 years. Governments in the future are going to look back at the leaders we have had lately with absolute disdain, and who can blame them? The last few governments have known what they're creating and they just crack on with it. Future leaders will have a nightmare scenario where they have an enormous number of privately renting pensioners, and the New Zealand pension system is not set up for this, as historically pensioners mostly were able to own their own homes. There is going to be poverty-stricken pensioners all over the place, and many of them are going to be pushed into homelessness. You'll have pensioners living in the streets, and at some point the system will eventually collapse. If everyone is now a renter in the type of cruel rental market that exists today, then God help us all. The crazy thing is, this widening wealth inequality, if not sorted very quickly, is going to create massive animosity between the haves and the have-nots. It already has, and history tells us that that will not end well for anyone. The short-sighted self-enrichment policies of recent MPs is sickening. They are personally benefiting as most of them are landlords. They are ruining the future of New Zealand for their own ends. Now they need to stop allowing early Kiwisaver withdrawals for house purchases. They need to regulate the New Zealand private rental industry by introducing long rental terms and putting a cap on price hikes. They need to introduce a license for anyone who manages rentals. If they manage their own property, and if they are not good managers, they lose their license and face prosecution if they are repeat offenders. They need to remove the insane tax deductibility scam, because New Zealand property investing is not a legitimate business as long as the accommodation supplement exists. I don't know how many times I have to inform people of this, but New Zealand landlording is not a business. It's not a legitimate business. You cannot have it both ways, guys. If you want to lose the accommodation supplement, fair enough. We'll call you a legitimate business, but until then, it's not a legitimate business. The RBNZ needs to stop incentivising property investment and realise that it is the problem. The RBNZ itself is causing the destruction of the New Zealand society, and the sooner it and everyone else realises this, the better. There's so many amazing New Zealand businesses that are being ignored as investors see property investing akin to investing in New Zealand government-backed bonds, but with much more profitability. The RBNZ and governments have given the impression that house prices are government-backed. They will never be allowed to crash or even come down to affordable levels. And this way of thinking has got to stop. Now, I have had some snide comments from investors. So what I would like to ask them is, why do you continue to invest in property knowing the damage that it is doing to the most vulnerable in society? Now listen, I get that you want to make yourself and your family richer, but are there no limits to what you will invest in? Do morals no longer come into it? I'd like to ask you, would you be happy to invest in big tobacco knowing the damage that it does to people? Or do I really even have to ask? I think the longer this insane get ahead of other people mentality is promoted by the RBNZ and governments, then the worse things are going to get. I wonder when the governments are finally going to realise that so many Kiwis are leaving because of what the governments have created. New Zealand is the most beautiful country on earth. It could be the fairest society on earth where everyone can enjoy it, but instead the governments have decided to just ring fence a few lucky people and do everything in their power to keep them happy, whilst allowing everyone else to slip down a slippery slope into oblivion. So if the New Zealand government does not want to make New Zealand fairer, then I think it's only fair that we tell Kiwis about other options, do you? Did you know that if you move to Australia and transfer your Kiwisaver, you can withdraw $15,000 per year or up to $50,000 over a few years to help with the purchase of your first home in Australia? Now, did you hear what I said there, your first home in Australia? Properties in New Zealand that you've had before are not even taken into consideration. So even if you've had 10 houses in New Zealand, you can still take up this offer as you had a first home buyer in Australia. I have added links about this in the description. And like I said before, I am completely against this taking money out of Kiwisaver. But also in Australia, your employer must pay 11.5% of your wages into your super account. So imagine how fast that rises. And as everyone knows, Kiwis now also have an easy path to citizenship. So unless this government does something fast to improve affordability for young Kiwis and crashes house prices to affordable levels that the average wage can afford, then it may be game over for New Zealand, I'm afraid. A young person can buy a flash apartment in Melbourne's Docklands for the price of an old shack in Invercargill. Now imagine the opportunities to have an exciting life in Melbourne for a young person. It's like a completely different world. Why should they not leave New Zealand if New Zealand seemingly only wants them to be rent slaves for eternity? It is abundantly clear that New Zealand youth is suffering. And all of this so a few wealthy people can get wealthier? No, they shouldn't take it anymore. So hooray for you wealthy people. Congratulations on you getting ahead at the expense of everyone else. It is way past time for change, guys. New Zealand needs to start thinking about its young people before they all just go. And who can blame them if they do go at this point? If house prices are in any way allowed to go back up again before a big substantial drop, then the government deserves to lose a whole generation of amazing people with so much potential, and to the lucky country that gets them. All of this just to make the rich richer. What an unmitigated disaster for New Zealand. So cheers, guys. Please like and subscribe if you have had enough of the whole New Zealand political class, and especially the RBNZ. Cheers.